enter. I can just get started.
Okay, you should have ability to present.
Okay. Bear with me. It's been a while since I've done Hangout. All right. I was on the others. Hang on a second. Sorry about that. I have 3 kids under 10 in the house with me, and I'm just like, quiet, please.
Good luck with that. Yeah.
Okay, let me.
So on the left-hand side, there should be a screen share button. If you don't see it, go to the chat window.
Okay, let me start up my thing here. Yeah, let's go back one. All right, here's a spiel. How many folks do we got in there? It seems like a little small house there, but
it is. We had 14 people say that they were showing up, and we have 4 of us. 5 of us tonight.
The joy of being a user group leader.
And it's like -5 wind chill here, so that might be part of it.
I don't miss it. Okay. All right. Managing AWS with AWS Tools for PowerShell. Of the 4 or the 5 folks there, how many folks actually use AWS?
At least, yeah, 4 or 5 of us, almost all of us.
Okay, perfect. Cool. That sounds good. All right. Give me one second here. About me. So I've been in IT for about 20 years. My name's Eric Courville, by the way. I've been active in the PowerShell community since about 2011. Before that, I spent many years. So I do a lot of Unix and Windows management. For most of those 20 years, I managed ERP solutions, whether they're Oracle Financials, PeopleSoft Financials, now SAP. Primarily on the Oracle database administration side, but it was really a core team of folks who did everything on top of their duties of being a production Oracle DBA. So from the time the SAs handed us the box to anything that the developers needed to do, it was really up to us to do it. So they called us the DBA group, but we did everything for the team. Web and database administration. So in that time, I did a lot of shell scripting on the Unix side, and I hated VB script with a passion. I had to support a bunch of ASP classic sites, so I was fairly decent with it, but I still hated it with a passion. And then PowerShell came along and really matured around PowerShell v3, and that's really when I started to get on board with it. Time I looked for a PowerShell user group and found there was none in my area, and you figured I'd be in the Bay Area and there'd have to be a PowerShell user group, but there wasn't. So got that set up, and I did that for a couple of years, and I haven't been doing that much. I live about 100 miles away from San Francisco, so it's pretty tough for me to manage that, and I got absolutely no help from folks. So I want to say this to everybody in the room. You guys have a great resource, a user group. Make the most of it, because it's not easy things, and it takes a team effort. And you know, it's great community to have until it's gone, because nobody else, you know, 14 people said they were coming and only 5 showed up. And again, you guys have very cold temperatures, but just reiterate that if you guys don't participate, then you won't have it very much longer. So that's my soapboxy type stuff there. So about 5 years ago, being a part of the user group and being a Microsoft MVP, I realized that I needed to get out of the enterprise space. So I started really pivoting my career towards cloud native mindset. So whether that's, full cloud adoption for everything I did. So, where I was a legacy Oracle DBA, I now start to work with stuff such as DynamoDB, DocumentDB, MongoDB, those types of database platforms, and cloud native type tooling and infrastructure. So I do work at Verizon, and we are an AWS shop. So just recently got certified in solution architect, so hooray for me. And that's about it. I live just next town over from Folsom, California. So I am probably less than 5 miles away from the prison. So if you ever wanted to know where I am. So I am originally a Detroiter, a native Detroiter. I grew up about 20 minutes north of Ann Arbor. I am not a U of M fan. And in fact, ironically, my high school's fight song was the OSU fight song. So like that.
We're in Ohio, so we can appreciate that.
There you go. Fight the team across the field. Exactly. Yes. So, and I grew up a Notre Dame fan. So officially, I was not a Michigan fan. So my connections to Cincinnati. Born and raised in Detroit in the 1970s, we watched a lot of TV. In Cincinnati was a big part of my early childhood.
That's exactly what's
another early part of my childhood.
Sparky Anderson.
Sparky Anderson, you betcha. So growing up as a kid in Little League, we always got to go see the Tigers and the Reds play an exhibition game in April. And I had a chance to see Pete Rose, Dave Parker, a lot of the old guys. So that was a huge experience. Later in my teen years, I used to drive my dad to Louisiana, and we'd take I-75 right straight through Cincinnati, right into Kentucky. You betcha. So I've crossed the Ohio River many times, and that's the only thing I can remember about being through. We'd get there early in the morning, and I'd see this obnoxious water tower. I'm like, oh my god, dude! So that's always going to be in my mind when someone says something about Kentucky. Remember. And last but not least, the most important part of Ohio for me was always Cedar Point. Greatest amusement park on earth. So that's it. I love Ohio. It's a good place. So I'm glad to talk to you guys today. Wish I could be there in person, but
well, if you're
far away.
Coming through, feel free to stop by.
I will make it a point to stop by. So let's get started here. So if you are just getting started with the PowerShell commandlets, and I have these links on my GitHub repo, and I'll pop the link in the chat here in a few minutes when we get over to the server. But here's some links I wanted to call out. PowerShell homepage. So basically you can go and download the bits for this. And it has the links to the documentation. And there's the actual documentation, or the actual link for the MSI. If you're going to be installing this on Windows. The reference, as I mentioned before. And I wanted to call out this link I just actually added because he is doing a lot more work these days since the last time I gave this talk. But everybody should be knowing Trevor Sullivan, longtime Microsoft MVP in the PowerShell space. He's done a few videos on Channel 9. He actually works for AWS now, and he's putting out a bunch of content, specifically AWS specific, but a lot of it has a lot of PowerShell. It's from a PowerShell perspective. So a lot of his examples and demos, he'll incorporate a lot of PowerShell into that. So just jot that down. You could even just search for him on YouTube. You'll find him, PC Geek 86. So, follow him on Twitter. That's his Twitter handle there too, and you'll get the updates. But really, really, really good stuff there. All right, so the next thing is the warning here. This is not going to be a substitute for configuration management. The way I like to present this is I like to use the PowerShell commandlets as an augmentation or as an ad hoc tool. By no means should you be basing your overall automation solely on these commandlets. Obviously, if you're using Puppet Chef or Ansible, that's where you're going to be doing your stuff. If you're using Terraform, CloudFormation templates, those are the artifacts you really want to be using. You can augment that with this, but you do not want to solely have this as your only method for managing your infrastructure in AWS. You could certainly, but for scale and for best practice, I would say not to do that. So again, ad hoc maintenance, very good for that. Discovery, integrating commandlets into business processes. So I'll give you an example here, and then in some of the demos that Trevor does, you'll understand where I'm talking about that. But if I have a server and I need to interact with an S3 bucket, you can automate those types of things. But again, very supplemental. So let's go ahead and do some demos now. Does anybody have any questions before I get started?
So Eric, this is Jay. Do you then lean on using the commandlets, say for a server connecting to an S3 bucket, instead of just using the APIs directly?
It really depends on what your business case is. I work with all sorts of different applications and infrastructure. So whether if I'm on a Unix machine or Linux box, and I need to, let's say I have some sort of interface I'm setting up where I have a customer dumping something into an S3 bucket. And let's say I'm on a Unix machine, I might have my Unix machine using the AWS CLI and the Python Bot03 library, reaching out to an S3 bucket to pull that file down and run some business process against it. So really, it depends on your use case, right? You have to manually do it or do it from shell script or an automated job. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Perfect. All right. So one thing I do want to mention, let's see here. I was messing around here. The AWS PowerShell commandlets are cross-platform. They do support ASP.NET Core. So they do support PowerShell Core. They did PowerShell, what is it? PowerShell 6.0 just the other day. So incredibly, AWS is really supportive of the PowerShell community and the PowerShell commandlets, more so than a lot of folks and even internal Microsoft groups. So kudos to AWS. They keep up pretty well here. So I'm on a Mac currently, and I can just open up my PowerShell terminal here on my Mac, and I can
Can you increase the font on that?
I certainly can. Hang on one second.
You're still using the release candidate of 6.
Is that? Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I did that. I updated my my Ubuntu box, but not this guy. But that's all right. I don't use it a lot on Unix. Actually, let me try this. That's better. Actually, I know it works. Let's just do this. Good. All right, so it works here. Let's give it a minute. It's so there's a couple of things here I want to talk about. And the first part of this talk is setting the commandlets. Now, if you look through the documentation, instance. I thought I had it on here. Oh well. Oh, I don't have my region set. Sorry about that. Read the error message. Yes. There we go. All right. So it is cross-platform. It does support PowerShell on PowerShell core. So this is on a Unix or a Mac. So I use a Mac at home. I use a Windows machine at work. I'm not a big Windows fan anymore. After 20 years of using Windows and suffering through Active Directory group policy, I've ditched Windows. So that's just me. All right, so getting set up here. Let me increase font on this guy a little bit too. Make this bigger. Can you guys see that?
Maybe a little bigger.
I can make it a little bigger. That'd be good. Okay, so in the documentation, the typical way of setting up that they show you in the documentation is the use of access keys and secret keys. And if you guys have ever set up a user in Active or in AWS, you're going to be familiar with the IAM service. So basically create a new user, and you can create credentials for them. You can create access keys and secret keys. Okay. So you can go in here and say, okay, I want to create an access key and a secret key. I won't do that because I don't need that here. In fact, I'll actually delete that. I don't want that. So anyway, it'll generate an access key and a secret key. And what that'll do is allow you to, interact with their API programmatically, whether it's through the command line or the SDKs, application type stuff. And what you can do is, once you've installed the PowerShell commandlets to your Windows machine or your Unix machine, Linux or Mac, you can set this in your home directory. So in your home directory, you'll have a .aws directory, and actually, put it over here. So okay, so I set this up on my local machine here. But be careful, the set this up with has limited access. Do not use your root account for this. Set up an account that has limited access so that if you ever lose your keys, and trust me, there are bots that scan GitHub routinely looking for access keys and secret keys because people absolutely do accidentally check their keys into GitHub. So just be very careful if you're going to do that. So, but what you do is in this credentials file, I'll have my access key and secret key. Okay, so that's one way to set this up. So once you run this set AWS credential and pass it your access key and secret key, you'll be able to access the commandlets. Another way to do it is if in some cases, you'll have a large number of people. So let's say you have 200 developers or operations folks in your company. Your folks will be like, well, I don't want to give everybody an account in AWS. So they might set up authentication to the AWS portal via ADFS and SAML authentication, right? So you'll log in with your company domain ID to AWS. And in that case, you won't have the ability to generate an access key and a secret key because ultimately everybody will be mapped to the same IAM role. In that case, then, you can, and this is the blog article that helps describe that, and this is in the let me get this repo URL to you guys before I forget. I'll put this in the chat. Where's the chat box here? Bear with me. Where? Okay. Let me know if you guys can see that chat.
Thank you.
Yep. So, sorry, where are we at? Getting started. Okay. So in this blog article, they describe how to. Sorry, let me close this a little bit. Resizing this. They describe how to set that up, and then basically what you can do is, if you can script out, and that's another hard part is trying to script out SAML authentication through PowerShell. It's doable. We didn't do that because I had a colleague who already created a Python script that does it. So I use Python to authenticate. And what that does, it generates a short-lived SAML token. And I'll get a short-lived access key and secret key. So for a couple hours, I'll have a temporary access key and secret key that will expire after a certain amount of time. Option number 2. And then the third option, this is the way I go now. I don't even bother really using the PowerShell commandlets locally on my machine at work. I actually have a dedicated AWS instance that I've given an AWS role to, an IAM role to, which will get it its access keys and secret keys. So I don't even have to do any configuration. As soon as I log onto the machine, much as this machine here, it's already ready to go. It's already got access keys and secret keys based off of the role that was applied to that AWS instance. Make sense?
Yes.
So it's just easier for me to deal with it that way. So that's basically the 3 different scenarios for getting started with the CLI. And it's the same way if you're on a Linux machine, you have a Red Hat Ubuntu machine, you can install the PowerShell. So you have 2 options in that scenario. Most people typically go with the Python AWS CLI. But if you want to stick with the PowerShell stuff, just install PowerShell, how it's described on the PowerShell homepage for installing PowerShell on Linux. And then you can actually, from the PowerShell gallery, get the AWS PowerShell commandlets. So you can just install it right from the PowerShell gallery. So pretty easy to set up. But in the same way, as long as you have a role bound to that AWS Linux instance, you should be good to go in that same way. So, okay. So let's get started with some other demos here. So let's do some simple stuff. So anybody have any questions before I show some more demos? Okay. All right, so that's getting started with the commandlets. In this case here, let's just do a simple little demo here. I'm going to add some users. So, I get a list of users. This could be, a feed dumped from your Active Directory commandlets, what have you. Nothing too crazy here. I'm actually going to remove these guys because I think I've already done this once. Selection. All right. Bear with me one second. Let me make sure I've purged these guys out. Okay, so basically, the AWS PowerShell commandlets, they follow the verb-noun syntax, and it's pretty explicit which commandlets are bound to which here. So, I've got new IAM users, right? I showed that instance where get EC2 VPC, right? That's pretty standard. Let me exit out of PowerShell here. If I do AWS, this is the AWS Python program here. So if I do EC2, it's basically the same type of format, you know. So I've got the program, and these are parameters. So even though this is Python and that's PowerShell, they're still pretty and really good about their documentation and how they handle their commandlets here. Let me show you this link here too. So where did I have that link? Oh, sorry. In the keynote here. This link I wanted to get because this has got the reference. I did want to show you this reference here. Let me copy that. As far as third-party commandlets and how they are with, and I would say that AWS is probably one of the better. So much like if you were to get help on any other commandlets, basically they've got a really good documentation section here. Let me see here. Let's take EC2 here. So here's all the EC2 commandlets, and it's pretty spot on. You know, pretty clear cut. You can find pretty much anything you're looking for in there. So in this case here, let's do a little bit of IAM stuff. So I got a new group of users. I've already created a user group or a group for them. And, you know, just simple for each statement here to take all those new users and add them to a group here. So I'm going to run this and it's going to fail. Now, I knew that was going to happen. And this is a good way to show you what's going on here. So basically what they're saying here is add new IAM user, and it's telling me I'm not authorized to perform that add users to group in a resource. Add user to group. So if you can see that little snippet right there, that's something we can use here, and I will show you that here. 1 second here. Let me copy that. So if we can go back over to IAM here, I'll show you the role. And there was a reason I copied this URL here. So basically, I have this Windows machine here. I've given this Windows machine a role to be able to interact with the AWS API. Now, this is telling me, however, you know, I can't do certain actions, okay? So I've got to figure out what do I need to do to allow it to do those things. So let me do this real quick here. If I run this command, so if you're not familiar with the meta link, so every AWS instance has metadata hosted on an internal API REST endpoint. So at the 169.254, 169.254 URL on every AWS instance, you can get data about that instance that you're on at the moment. Now, if I query this guy and I go to IAM, security credentials, I can see what role is bound to this instance, okay? So if I go back to the AWS console here, if I go under services at EC2, let me just look at my instance real quick. And I can see that that matches up with that role, okay? So it says EC2 role right there. Sorry if it's a little small. Let me see if I can bump this up for you too. Okay, so these are all the permissions that are bound to that EC2 role. And I can create that IAM user, right? So you see, I was able to create the user, but I wasn't able to add the user to the group, right? So I tried to do two things. I tried to create the user and add them to a specific group. But it told me I did not have permissions to do that. So I need to go into and see if I can't add that to those users. So what I could probably do here is, let me try to do this real quick. Let me edit the policy. Yeah. I believe this is all I need to do here. All right, so I just added that user to group, added that snip to my policy here. And I'm just going to purge these users out so I can try this cleanly here. Let's do just all. Oh, actually, let me do this. Control C this guy. And if I use the force command here. Hey. Okay, user's gone. All right, perfect. All right, so I'm just going to try to recreate those guys again. Now it created them. So hopefully that was a good demo of how tedious roles and policies in IAM can be. Does anybody have any questions about that? Because that's a little squirrely. So now you see everybody's a part of that no perms group. So I basically just added 4 people to a user group or to a group that has no permissions. But what this demonstrated was that if you don't set up your roles appropriately, you might have, you're going to run into some problems because you might have your PowerShell commandlets trying to do something that it is not able to do, and specifically ties back to those IAM roles. Anybody have any questions about that? So if you are going to use IAM roles for your PowerShell commandlets, make sure you have the function doing the functionality you need it to do. So sorry about that. Go ahead.
What's the help look like for these commandlets? Is the help pretty good?
Yeah, definitely is pretty good. And if I go back to let's see the reference here. So if you just drill into the references here, this one's add EC2 volume. Let me zoom in on this. It's pretty standard, looks exactly like typical PowerShell help. And this is basically, they pull the help from their live help in the commandlet. So if I go in here, let me open an actual PowerShell terminal here. Sorry. No. Oh, come on. Help and live update, but come on, sometimes I just don't want it. Okay, so just like regular PowerShell help. And if anybody knows who June Blender is, she actually works now on the AWS documentation team. So AWS does put a lot of effort into their documentation. One thing I will point out, I will call out, and a lot of times the way you will actually, instead of using where statements to filter out your data, because a lot of the information you're looking for is highly nested inside of the objects you return back from AWS. Let me show you this here, actually. Let's do get EC2 instance. Okay. So I ran get EC2 instance. What does it do? It returns me a reservation ID. It's like, okay, well, here. But I just wanted to, so let's say I wanted to search on something on the tags of an AWS instance. But there's no tag parameter that I can pass at the top level here in get EC2 instance. So if I do, let's just set this to a variable. So if I get member on this guy, yeah, it passes me a reservation object. So if you're familiar with the AWS console, when you spin up a new AWS instance, you're not spinning up an instance, you spin up a reservation. Okay, you could have n number of instances you spin up. Typically, most people just spin up a single instance. But in that idea of that whole process, AWS says, do you want 1 or 100? This is the time when you are spinning up your infrastructure. So in lots of cases, they're not expecting you to just spin up one instance. So the way they return this data back to you is as a reservation. So if you see in here, it has n number of instances to a reservation. So if I look at a.instances, it'll pass me back my instances. In this case, I only have one instance running. So as you can see, it becomes a rabbit hole as you try to drill down on the data you want. Okay, so it can get kind of tedious. So if I drill here and if I do a get member on here, okay, this has more data, and you see buried in here are my tags. So if I wanted to look up something by tags, you know, I don't have any tags on here. By VPC ID. Okay, if I knew the VPC ID, but you know that's double nested down inside of an object. You can't really, you have to do really messy, ugly recursive where clauses, you know, trying to loop through return objects to drill down into what you're looking for. So if I go back here to the help on this, AWS provides the filter parameter, and they will provide a pretty robust amount of criteria which you can filter off of. So in this case, if I knew the tags, if I were looking for anything that might have tags of like production web server, use that filter command and actually look on a key value pair here. If we look at the example down here, I think they have an example of this, right? So get EC2 instance and filter off of this object here, or the VPC ID equals that guy, right? And the subnet of this, okay?
So
and returning back the instances.
Ended together.
One more time.
The question was those. I guess those. If you put two items, two different key value pairs, and
yeah, so you can filter on multiple criteria.
Gotcha. And they're anded together, not or.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So the documentation is pretty good here. And like I mentioned before, you know, I can add users, I can remove users. So I had all those users, boom, and just delete them. Oh, you really? Okay, so I guess I have to remove them from the group first. Did not know that. Oh, okay, don't really care. I can do that later. But I guess you have to remove the users from the group before you remove the users. Okay, so that's IAM. Pretty straightforward. I'll save that off. I'll close this guy. Next thing I wanted to call out here was the S3 bucket stuff. Pretty simple. There's nothing magical about this here. I've got, you can create buckets. I already have this guy out here. I'll just create this new one here. So if I do F8 on this guy, me a new bucket. Okay, pretty standard. I've got a bucket here. This is not going to work because I did not clone this. Yeah, I did. Okay, so that should work. So let's say I have, in this case, I have a website that I just want to push out to AWS to S3. So I can update this. Let me show you the bucket just to make sure nothing up my sleeve type of thing. All right. All right. It just got created. It's got a date time stamp, January 16th. Empty bucket. So if we go now and just run this guy. Sorry. So this commandlet, write S3 object, pretty straightforward. Write something out to an S3 bucket. So I'm going to write an S3 object being a file, right? These are file objects or object-based storage. So if I hit F8 here, okay, so there's a problem with my path here. Let me double check this. Okay. Is that all users documents? Oh, see, sorry about that. Oh, I found that. That should work. Okay. Now if I refresh this guy, boom. So as you can see in this scenario, you know, if it's very simple to be able to put files, send files and retrieve files. You know, I don't know if you guys are used to Azure and Azure file storage. I find S3 much simpler in this respect, a lot easier to work with. If I want to get a list of all the objects on there, so, you know, I can run this guy here. And it'll give me a listing of all the files out there. Okay, so in this case, I just had one file. All right. And so if I want to pull that file down now, what you'll find in with regards to S3, some of the functionality that you might find in the AWS CLI, the Python version, you do not find here in PowerShell. And specifically, this sync parameter, I find this very helpful if I'm synchronizing files. So, you know, if I got one website locally, I want to synchronize that to my S3 bucket so I can push that out with my automation. There is no commandlet that I'm aware of right now that allows you to synchronize with an S3 bucket. But easily enough, if you do have the AWS CLI installed on the same machine, these inside of PowerShell scripts behave very nicely. So, you know, you could certainly run this command here. So if I run this guy right now, nothing to, oh, well, I forgot to install the Python commandlets here, but you could easily run that. So if you had to augment and supplement your PowerShell commandlets with some specific Python stuff, you could easily do that here. So I apologize, I forgot to install.
CLI commandlets, do they have the option of returning like JSON formatted information back?
Yes, the AWS Python, the AWS CLI program, there's 3 return types. There is text, which is just full text output. Table, which is if you want a fancy looking table, and then JSON. By default, it defaults its output to JSON. So, which is very handy when you're doing this from PowerShell, because you can easily take that output and do convert from JSON and put that into a variable in an object. So very handy. So yeah. Yep. Okay. Let's carry on then. I got a couple more demos. How are we doing on time? What do you got there? It's
We're good.
7:18. Okay, we're doing pretty good. All right. Okay, we did S3. Okay, so let's do this. If you guys have used CloudFormation templates, that is directionally, depending on whether you're using Terraform, you're not using Terraform. You guys know what Terraform is. I shouldn't assume you guys know what it is. A tool from HashiCorp that allows you to automate infrastructure across multiple different types of clouds. So you can have one Terraform document that might create infrastructure in AWS and Azure and Google Compute concurrently, all in the same script, right? So in this, typically on AWS, you're working with CloudFormation to build stacks. Is that what you guys are used to?
My organization uses Terraform.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Okay. So in this case, what I'll do is I'll just demo CloudFormation. But yeah, Terraform. It seems that a lot of people are just they've used CloudFormation templates. They work, they do the job, but a lot of people aren't terribly enamored with them. And a lot of people don't want to invest time and effort into cloud-specific technology. So that's I see a lot of people going to Terraform, and I am as well. I prefer HashiCorp tools. So I'm very excited, and I like using it. So, but in this case, I have just this one CloudFormation template, JSON objects here. So I've got parameters, and I've got a resource that I'm going to create. So in this case, I'm just going to create an AWS S3 bucket. So I want to create a stack that just has an S3 bucket. So let me go back here and make sure I've got my stuff cleaned up here. Go to CloudFormation. Let me delete this stack. I've already created this. Let me just delete it. Okay, now it's deleted. Let me make sure that the S3 bucket is deleted as well. And everything looks good. Okay, so bucket, or I'm sorry, I've got this CloudFormation template. Now I want to run this guy here. What I found here is this template URL. I have to assume it lets you run this from a local JSON file. I had a little hard time, and to be honest with you, I didn't spend a lot of time on it. I just stuck it out in my S3 bucket, said fine here. I'll call it from an S3 bucket. I'm still looking to see if I could pass a parameter that will just let me point to a JSON file locally on my machine. I didn't find that, but no big deal. I just called it from the S3 bucket. I'm just gonna define a stack name here. Got a new CloudFormation. See that abbreviation, CFN stack. So CloudFormation stack. AWS CloudFormation stack API operation. And notice that if you guys, does everybody use Visual Studio Code? I mean, this should be like a great advertisement for Visual Studio Code and the extension.
Yeah, we beat it to death in our user group. So
love it. Love it. Look, dude, I'm running in AWS. I'm running AWS commandlets, and this stupid thing has IntelliSense and tells me exactly what that thing does. Kudos to the VS Code guys. I love this tool. Even on Linux machines, I'll run it. Okay, so basically I pass it a stack name, point it to a CloudFormation template, and here are the parameters I'm going to pass to that CloudFormation template. So if I look inside that CloudFormation template, it's expecting two parameters, a bucket name and an access control option, okay? Simple stuff. So if I run this guy, go ahead and run that. It produces an ARN value for me, an AWS resource number or name. So this has created a new stack out in the US West 1, and it's created a bucket organic IT test 1. Okay. So let's go take a look. So I should have a bucket here. Brand new bucket, organic IT test 1. Go out in the cloud formation. There's my stack. Okay. Stack ID right there. Perfect. Okay. You know, as you guys know in the news, you constantly hear of people accidentally putting public S3 buckets out there. And they like to stick 50 million records of customer personal data out there. You know, it's standard operating procedure. So if you're ever stuck in that position where you accidentally created a bucket and you gave it the wrong permissions, right? Oh, I didn't want to give it public read. Actually, I wanted to make that private. You can run the update CloudFormation stack command. So basically the same thing. Pass it a stack name, template URL. So basically the same information, and you can update the stack. So if I hit F8 there, so now,
So Eric,
hopefully.
Quick question there. Is there a reason why those parameters can't be specified in that template as well?
Yeah, I mean, you could hard code that in the template. Certainly.
So you could provide it just the template URL and everything that you needed in the
Yeah, so basically if I did that, let's do a different one here. Let's create a bucket name. Let's call this bucket. Just back up to S3 though.
Yeah, we spell Cincy with a Y.
I'm from Michigan. I don't care. Is there a lot of people? Do you guys want to hear the Toledo joke?
Sure.
The Michigan's Toledo joke?
Sure.
You're not allowed to say the M word here, by the way.
No, it's fine. I'm from Michigan. So, okay. How do you find Toledo from Michigan?
I don't know.
Go south till you smell it and east till you step in it. So, sorry about that. Toledo's Toledo. We all love Toledo. That's the Toledo joke. I had to do it. I apologize. I'm sure you guys have tons of Detroit jokes. So I was born in Metro Detroit, and yeah, joke all you want about that place. Said before, I love Ohio, so I rib. So what were we doing here? So we're going to push an updated version of that script up to AWS here, or up to S3. Right object. Let's do this. We need. I didn't hear a lot of response after I said that joke, so everybody probably hates me now. So I apologize. That probably wasn't in very good taste, but I'm sorry. All right, so I just pushed out this updated version of this bucket. And all I did really was I just updated that default value because I knew that was going to fail. It's case sensitive. So if I come back here to create a stack here, I should be able to run this guy here. And I'm going to do a different stack here. Let's. So basically, I'm going to not run that part. Let's do this part here. I think I can do that. Okay, let's go. Okay. And I didn't like something in there. What didn't I like? Bucket name should not contain uppercase characters. Okay, well, that's easy enough to fix. Bucket name should not contain uppercase characters. Oh, okay. So I cannot have uppercase characters. So while I'm here, yes, I will fix the Cincy. So I'll save this guy. And I will push this back up there.
Fair enough.
Okay, so I've updated the script. I've used write S3 object to push that back out to S3. And come back here. I'll rerun this guy. I'll run this selection. Oh, yeah, I forgot to delete that guy. So that stack already exists. I'll just come back here. Just go do this through the console here. So even though it rolled back my S3 bucket, it still kept the stack in there. So even though the creation of the object in the stack failed, it still created the stack, and it didn't purge the stack. It rolled back the object, but it didn't roll back the stack itself. So useful information. Okay, so if I rerun this guy here, let's do this. F8. Okay, so hopefully, okay, create in progress. That's a good sign. If I go back out to S3, now I should have a Cincy bucket. Perfect. Does that example answer what you were asking about? So in this case, I didn't pass parameters to it, right? I had default values inside of the CloudFormation template. So if I don't pass it parameters, give it the same, right?
Right.
Make sense? You guys still there?
Yeah, sorry, can you hear us?
Okay, cool. Very good. Okay. I thought you guys are still mad about my Toledo joke, so I'm not here. I'm dying over here. Sorry. Okay. Come on. You guys make fun of Ann Arbor all you want. I'll chip in. I'll join in. Actually, I've worked in Dublin, Ohio for quite a while too, so I'm very fond of Ohio. Okay, so in this one here, I'm going to create an EC2 instance, and this is where, you know, I mentioned before, PowerShell commandlets aren't a replacement for configuration management, right? So, you know, it is better to use the tooling that AWS provides, and specifically a CloudFormation template, right? That is, you know, the standard way of doing things. However, you can do things in PowerShell. Okay, so long roundabout way of saying that you can do a lot of that stuff as well inside of PowerShell, but it can get a little convoluted and confusing for people who aren't used to PowerShell. Excuse me. So in this case, basically all I'm going to do here is I want to build a new web server, a Linux web server, and I'm going to create a new EC2 security group. So I'm going to create a new security group and define the CIDR address ranges and the ports, all that good stuff. Going to add some storage to it, going to bind some tags to it, and basically just create that new web server. I've already created the security group, so I'm going to skip this part here. But, you know, basically, here's my VPC here. If I run that, I know I want to define this variable, so I'm going to hang on to that variable there. But so I've already got this security group defined, but I can just go through this here real quick. So this guy's going to basically create a new security group. Okay, that's pretty simple here. So it just passes the VPC ID that I just defined here. So I only have one VPC. So basically grabs the VPC ID, passes that to the new security group. And then basically what you do is you create these new objects. So I've created the security group, but there's no permissions on it right now. So being a Linux web server, I need to open up SSH, and then it's gonna, I'm just opening up HTTP, so port 80. Well, basically what you have to do is you have to create an Amazon EC2 IP permissions model. So what you'll find out is the data model in Amazon is actually pretty good. And one of the reasons I like PowerShell so much in AWS is it helps me learn the AWS API very well. And then I can take that and port that over to Boto 3 in Python because, I've been learning Lambda and extending what I'm doing in AWS with Lambda quite a bit. Understand the AWS data model for the backend APIs. So interesting way of learning that stuff, but basically that's how that hierarchy is. So you're in Amazon, you're in the EC2, right? It's model, and in there's an object called IP permission, and it has an IP protocol, a from port, a to port, and IP ranges, okay? So I define this object IP1. That's one of my security group rules. And then there's another one. I've got IP2, which is my HTTP port. And I'm opening this up for everybody worldwide. Okay. And then you can pass that as an object to this EC2 security group ingress. Right. So grant these ports and site block ranges to this EC2 group, so the security group. So I've created that new security group, bound it to group ID, and I pass that as the group ID to this command line, okay? And it basically creates that whole thing. So if we can look at that here, if I go back to EC2, under security groups, where you at? Where you at? I thought I had it there. What the hell did I name it? Sorry. Linux Web Server Security Group. I might have put it in a different region. I think I have it in a different region. Previously in a different region. And there it is. Yeah, so I did. I created this in US East 1. So I guess I can create this again. Yeah, okay, so this instance is in US West this time. Last time I ran this demo was in US East. So I think I can actually run this. Let me double check. All right. Okay, should be okay. Let me see if I can't run this. So I should be able to do this. Wait, what? What didn't you like? Yeah, let me see. I think I know what the problem is. Yeah. I'm in a different region. That's why this is being squirrely. So I didn't account for that. Sorry about that. And PowerShell's broken. There we go. My only pet peeve about PowerShell is when I hit Control C, I really mean Control C. You know, can you please terminate that command for me? Hopefully I didn't freeze this guy. Come on. Actually, I'll just close this shell out.
You can just run a reload on your VS Code. If you hit F1, type your reload window. So,
Oh, here it is. Oh, you tell me. All right. I'll just bring back a new window. Where's that terminal? Let me bring back the terminal. Crap.
yeah, create new integrated terminal.
All right. Easy enough. All right. So if I do, let me do this guy again. All right. I have two VPCs. Okay, bear with me one second here. I did a ton of studying here and did a bunch of stuff in this VPC. I probably shouldn't be doing this in this VPC, but give it a shot. Oh, where am I at? Sorry. All right, which one do I want? I am in. Okay, so, all right, perfect. All right, so this guy here. So if I'm, all right, so I want the second one, so I'm fudged this. So I want VPC, the second VPC, and I'm going to cheat. Let's say put in that VPC. So if I run this guy again, the term group ID, oh, sorry. There we go. All right, so now I can continue on with this guy. So I've created that new group, security group here. All right, so Linux web server security group. But as you can see, there's no ingress rules. All right. So now I can come back here, create these objects. All right. Hit F8. Okay, those are in memory now. Now I should be able to run this guy. And there we go. All right. So now those rules are defined in that security group. Okay. And why did I set that guy? Okay. don't think this is needed, but I'll run this anyway. What the hell? All right. I think I might have needed that later. So, okay, so now I've created that object. So now I can build out this EC2 instance. First thing I'm going to do is start setting up the storage on this guy. So much in the same way I had to object on a specific AWS object, I have to do the same thing for the storage, for the EBS storage. So I'm going to add an additional volume outside of the default volume with the root, I should say the root volume that gets created by default. This is the other mount point. So basically I have to define a new object in the EBS block device, size, the storage type, and whether this is delete on termination or not. Okay, so I can just stick this guy here. All right, so now I got that. Next, I have to do the device mapping. So in another object that points to block device mapping in a device name, and then I've got to map this EBS object that I just created to this device mapping. So at this point, I basically, if you're familiar with the AWS console where it has the add storage, next, spinning up a new AWS instance, this piece here just basically took care of that portion. Okay. I'm going to create an object of tags. All right, so I've got those tags. You can also do user data if you're familiar with user data. So when the AWS instance spins up, you can have it run scripts. Doing this from PowerShell against a Linux machine, I had some issues I wasn't able to sort out, but it should be doable. I think I was just doing something dumb with my encoding of the script that I was trying to run, so I just commented it out. But you can certainly do that. Especially in PowerShell. So if I was doing this against a Windows machine, it actually, I think it's a lot easier to do that from PowerShell than it is to do a Linux machine from PowerShell. Anyway, this is the AWS AMI that I'm going to use. This is an Amazon Linux instance. So I've got that defined. So now basically what I'm going to do, this is the portion where I'm actually going to spin up that EC2 instance. So I'm just going to set it to a variable when I create it. But basically, I'm running the new EC2 instance, passing it an image ID, which is the AMI here, passing in a key name so I can retrieve my administrator password or connect to through SSH. In this case, it's a Linux machine, so I need that PEM file to the machine. Defining an instance type, in this case, I'm saying it's a T2 micro. And if you read about reservations earlier, this is that portion really highlights that fact. You give a min or a max count. So depending on availability and the type of instance you're trying to spin up, you might be doing spot instances, whatever type of instance you're doing, you can give it a max and a min count. So let's say I need 3, but if you can give me 6, great, right? So your min count, you could put 3 and max count 6, right? So based on availability and how many instances you already have, you might be able to get what you asked for there. I'm specifying a security group. So I've already defined that updated security group ID. I did that here. So, okay, so I had that security group here. but it didn't provide me, I don't believe it gives me the ID. So I had to set it to another variable there. So let's see what that, I hit F8 here. Yeah. So I'm looking for, I believe it's the group ID. And when I created that object here, that group ID here, it didn't have that available to me. So I defined this variable down here and basically just got it from get EC2 security group. So I passed the object I originally created, a pipe that to get EC2 security group, and it spits out an object that can give me that group ID. So now when I'm running this here, I'm able to get that group ID to pass to this parameter. Okay. Then you got block device mapping, a big object I just created with volume and device mapping here. So with that, and then I'm passing it an instance profile name. So basically I'm telling it a role to give to it. So much the same way that this machine that I'm running has the EC2 role, I can have that Linux machine have that EC2 role as well. And if I install the AWS CLI on that machine, it can interact with the AWS services. So if I run this, hopefully it works. Why didn't you work? Oh, you know what? I think here, I'll skip that. I'm sorry. Forget that role. I think I messed that up. We'll just skip that. Oh, and I'm in a different region. So the AMI that I was using before is not going to work for me. So let me get that real quick here. I will get this here. So we're in Northern California. So it's a different AMI than the US East one. Let's update that. Okay, and I'll redefine that variable. Let's try this again.
Is there a commandlet to search the AMIs?
Yeah, but there's a ton of them, right? So right,
yeah. I was just curious.
I see that. Yeah, certainly there is. Yep. Give me 1 second. I have a key that I did not have in that region, so I need to find my key pairs here. Which key pair do I have? Okay, I'll just pick one that I have. SVC, was it underscore now? Okay, fourth time's a charm. All right, so basically it created that instance, but you're like, hey, Eric, what happened to all those tags? Okay, so when the new EC2 instance commandlet doesn't give you the ability to, much in the same way, and I don't understand why you wouldn't do this, but you see here, I could bind that object, that device mapping. I could create a new EBS volume and pass all that information to the new EC2 instance commandlet. Why the hell can't I do that with tags? Don't know, whatever. So let me show you this guy here. So I should have that new EC2 instance. So I've got a new Linux machine here. Okay. It's got my security group. Perfect. Okay. It has the block device that I specified there. So I have that new block device, 20 gigabyte. Okay. But if I go back here, if I go under tags, give it a second. I don't see any tags here. So what's going on? Why is it stopping? I don't know why it's stopping. No biggie. Anyway, so it doesn't allow you to bind that. So basically, what you have to do is use the new EC2 tag commandlet and pass it that my tags object. So that hash table of here this guy here. Now I should see my tags. Okay, so just something to keep an eye out for. And this can become an issue if you work for a company that is overzealous about you tagging your instances, and they have a Lambda job that will delete your instance if it's not tagged, like immediately when you create it. And I'm saying this from experience. You know, you're going to screw yourself because it doesn't immediately bind those tags. So this is where the problem of trying to build your infrastructure with PowerShell scripts as opposed to using CloudFormation templates or Terraform, this is where you can run into problems, right? Shouldn't be that big of a deal. You know, I almost immediately bound tags to my new instance. But, you know, that Lambda job in CloudWatch was a lot faster than you were in your PowerShell terminal. So, you know, just things to be aware of. So, does anybody have any questions about that demo?
So are you saying when using Terraform or CloudFormation that the tags are bound at instantiation of the instance?
Yeah, yeah.
Huh. So it sounds maybe just like a feature request.
Or it's a lot faster, as far as I understand.
Yeah. Maybe it's a request.
Yeah. So, and that's pretty much it. You know, I just scratched the surface here. If you want to see some more complex demos and a lot more integration, I would point you to Trevor's YouTube videos. If you have any questions, you know, by all means, you can ping me on Twitter. Trevor's pretty approachable. He answers the questions in his comments in his YouTube channel. So
he also joins your videos. Well, I don't know if you noticed, but he's watching. Hi, Trevor.
Oh, hey.
Are you like administratively muted, Trevor, or can you unmute yourself?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. I don't know how to. So sorry. I was afraid I muted everybody and they couldn't unmute themselves. So thanks for
I think my Bluetooth is just switching between my phone. I should probably turn it off my phone so it doesn't interfere. Anyway, good job, Eric.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Eric. Good information.
Still there?
Maybe he left us.
A lot more stable and static for a lot longer. Maybe that's helped them.
Hey, Eric, you dropped
make cleaner interfaces.
Like a minute. So I'm not sure.
Oh, sorry about that.
We thought you left because Trevor was, you were just like, okay, Trevor will take over now.
No. I was just saying, you know, it's just AWS does a fantastic job with their commandlets, and the breadth of the commandlets is just astounding. You know, so kudos to AWS. They are on the ball when it comes to PowerShell.
I'm just saying that because I'm here.
I am. Hey, Trevor. What's up, buddy?
Nice job, mate.
Thank you. So that's it.
Eric, I'll get your GitHub link in our show notes and whatnot, and we really appreciate your time to share for the group. Like I said, sorry, there like 14 people signed up and -5.
You know, I will give this talk to 2 people. I'm totally fine with it. So no worries at all.
Yeah. Well, great. We appreciate it.
All right, gang. Thanks again.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, guys.